Do the New York Mets still have their best baseball ahead of them?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House, the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at supplyhouse.com. Well, we were wondering how the Mets would do taking their momentum from that series against the Orioles and bringing it with them to the West Coast to face the Padres. And so far, so good. 17 hits and 8 runs for the Mets lineup tonight as they relatively cruised to a victory over the Padres. It all started in the first inning when Dylan Cease was met pretty rudely by Francisco Lindor and Mark Vientos as they greeted him with a pair of doubles to start the game, putting a run on the board before Cease even got to the third batter, although he settled in from there in that first inning, navigated without giving up any more runs, got through the second and the third. But in the fourth inning, the Mets scored on him again. Jesse Winker got a single with one out. Jose Iglesias a double. Then the Mets scored on a pass ball, and they scored another run on an infield hit by Jeff McNeil, which gave Luis Severino a 3-0 cushion. Now, Sevy, coming off his complete game shutout against the Marlins, he looked really good early. Had his best stuff. His slider looked sharp. He was attacking the zone. He scattered 4 singles and 1 walk across the first 4 innings pitched with 4 strikeouts. At the time, he was at 61 pitches through 4 innings, and you thought he might get you through the 6th, potentially, at least. But when you got to the 5th inning, we saw maybe the wear and tear of going through that complete game in his previous start because Luis Severino did not have it at all in the 5th inning, and the game was probably at its greatest risk of getting away from the Mets in that frame. He walks the leadoff man, gives up a base hit to Luis Arraez. Then he walks the bases loaded. So you got bases loaded, nobody out. And Severino did not look like he was going to be able to get the big out. And quite honestly, it could have gone the other way on him because Jake Cronenworth smoked one, 111 miles per hour off the bat. Luckily, Jose Iglesias had him positioned well. It was one step to his left, and he just reached out, picks up a sharp one hop, makes the quick turn to second, perfect feed to Francisco Lindor, and Severino on a ball that was ripped gets 2 outs, only gives up 1 run. He did walk the next batter, Manny Machado, but was able to get Xander Bogaerts to ground out to end that inning and really escapes that frame. The Mets shut him down after that. Only 5 innings from Severino in this one, but he gets a victory, and the bullpen was very solid from there. One of the stories of this game is going to be the bullpen. We'll talk about in the next segment because Huascar Brazoban had a disaster of a 9th inning. But prior to that, the Mets got really good pitching out of their pen, and this is what they're going to need moving forward, particularly in this series. The Padres have a very good bullpen, although the Mets did jump all over it tonight, but it wasn't the A relievers. I mean, they got Brian Hoeing, but in the 9th inning, it was Gillespie, not necessarily a Tanner Scott or a Jason Adam or a Suarez coming out of the bullpen for the Padres in a game that the Mets still carried a 3-1 lead at the time. They need to match that effort in this series to get a victory, and tonight they did that. Danny Young was great. Pitched a solid 6th inning, struck out the first 2 guys that he faced, 1-2-3 frame. Reed Garrett comes on in the 7th, walked the leadoff man. We'll talk about him a little bit more in the next segment as well. Didn't think his stuff looked particularly sharp in the beginning of that outing, but he gets a big double play ball. Again, it was Iglesias to Lindor to Alonso. That helps him get through that inning facing the minimum. And then Phil Maton, a perfect 8th inning. I think he looks probably the best out of the bullpen, him along with Danny Young today. And that set the stage for Edwin Diaz to come into the 9th inning to notch a save, but the Mets had other plans. Top of the 9th inning, Jeff McNeil, Tyrone Taylor, Francisco Lindor, and Mark Vientos all got base hits in a row to start things off. Vientos plating 2 with his base hit for a 3 RBI day. Brandon Nimmo hits into a double play ball, but then Pete Alonso sees a pretty vacated hole on the right side of the infield, just shoots a ground ball through there. That allows another run to score with Lindor coming in. Then Jesse Winker doubles, hits one in a pretty similar spot to where his walk-off homer went, but maybe a bigger ballpark keeps him in. I'm not sure if that would have gone out at Citi Field. It might have, but one hops the wall. Alonso scores on it, nearly misses third, nearly misses home. By the way, I don't think I ripped Pete Alonso for what happened yesterday. Some horrible base running when he tried to go first to third on a ball hit right in front of him to the left fielder. But regardless, Pete was able to touch all the bases. He scores on it. Winker advances to third on the play. And then you see Jose Iglesias in a 7-1 game beating out an infield hit. And that was the difference in this game, or one of the differences between these two teams. Hopefully it carries over. The Padres playing very lackadaisical, and part of that is just because Manny Machado is their star player. And I think there's a huge difference between their star player, their face of the franchise, although Tatis, when he's healthy, might be that guy, and Francisco Lindor. It's a completely different mindset on how they attack the game. I'm not going to knock Machado too much. I've wanted Machado on the Mets, so I can't all of a sudden say I don't like his game. But it does give you that sense of just lackadaisical, letting the game come to you, where the Mets were pushing the envelope. Jeff McNeil being at an infield hit to score a run. Jose Iglesias in a game that they already had a huge cushion, not giving anything away. He's talked about that since he was out of the majors last year. He's never going to take it for granted again. That's got to be, I know Gary said this during the broadcast, fifth, sixth. I feel like it's almost been in double digits the amount of time that Jose Iglesias beats out an infield hit. And ultimately, that's pretty much the game for the Mets. Francisco Alvarez struck out to end that rally, completing a golden sombrero. He was the only Mets starter without a hit in this game. And as a team, I already mentioned it, 17 hits altogether. They were 6 for 14 with runners in scoring position. Francisco Lindor was 2 for 4 with a walk. Mark Vientos 2 for 5 with 3 RBIs. Pete Alonso 3 for 5 with a run and an RBI. Jesse Winker 2 for 5 with a double, 2 runs scored, and an RBI. Jose Iglesias 2 for 5 with a run scored and an RBI, I believe, as well. Jeff McNeil 3 for 4, run scored, RBI. Tyrone Taylor 2 for 4 with a run scored. So altogether, the Mets top to bottom, outside of Alvarez and Brandon Nimmo as well, had a great offensive day with JD Martinez and Starling Marte sitting on the bench. Shows you the depth of this team. Also Harrison Bader as well. So there was one other element to this game that we're going to discuss in this next segment, though. And that is the adventure that was the bottom of the ninth inning with Huascar Brazoban, who I believe just pitched himself off of the roster. I'll explain why in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Liquid IV. Get hydrated with essential vitamins, electrolytes, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, Liquid IV. What I love about Liquid IV is the convenience. It's so easy to just rip open a pouch, pour it into 16 ounces of water, you're good to go. I love the taste, my favorite being the strawberry lemonade flavor, but also the popsicle firecracker mixing some lemon lime with cherry and raspberry, another really good flavor as well. And the big part about Liquid IV is just how hydrated you feel after drinking it, because it does hydrate you better than water with 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. There's no more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online with their easy-to-use website that is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program, where every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports by checking out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trying to get to 10,000 subs by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk a little bit about the Mets bullpen and what was an adventure of a bottom of the ninth thing for Huascar Brazoban, who I believe is going to get optioned after this appearance. We've been talking about it all week. Dedniel Nunez is going to return to this bullpen. We saw a camera shot of him in the bullpen today. He is with the club. He is just waiting to be activated. I'm sure that's going to happen for Saturday's game. Jose Budo, not going to be available to pitch, I'm sure. Phil Maton went today. Reed Garrett went today. You're going to want Dedniel Nunez in there to be the eighth inning guy to set up for Edwin Diaz. So what will be the roster move? We talked about this again all week, and there's been three names that really came up because these are guys that still have options, and I don't think the Mets are going to DFA Ryan Stanek or Adam Ottavino at this time. So you could look at Danny Young. You could look at Reed Garrett, or you could look at Huascar Brazoban. Those are the three names that you have to think about as far as who could be optioned for Dedniel Nunez. And based on the performance tonight, there is no doubt in my mind Brazoban will be in Syracuse or on his way to Syracuse tomorrow. Danny Young pitched, and he actually got up first in this game in the fifth inning. There were two lefties coming up, but I thought the Mets were making a point to get Danny Young into this game because I think there was a very real possibility that he was going to be the guy sent down. I actually predicted that, I believe, earlier this week, simply because I thought they wanted to keep Brazoban as a guy that had a lot of success this year, not necessarily with the Mets, but prior to coming to the Mets, I thought Garrett was someone that they might want to keep around because of his high leverage ability. And Danny Young, we've seen shuttle back and forth at times. So I did wonder if the Mets would go no lefty for a little bit here, sort of reset the clock on Young, because when you option a guy, they have to stay down for 15 days. That would put him in line to come up not that far after September call-ups. Alex Young could always be inserted back into this bullpen very soon. So I just thought that that might have been the direction the Mets were potentially thinking about going. And I imagine most likely it was going to come down to Young or Brazoban. But Danny Young comes in. He shows why you want to have a lefty in that bullpen. He strikes out a pair of lefties, gets through a perfect inning. I think Young is probably safe after this performance. And the same thing can be said for Reed Garrett, because Reed Garrett had such a great start to his season and has pitched in so many big games for the Mets. Not always well, but he is a guy that has that high leverage experience. I think they still trust that Reed Garrett has better stuff than a lot of guys in this bullpen. But first pitch he throws in this game is 2 feet outside. And he walks a guy in, what was his name? Mason McCoy, the 29-year-old rookie, starting his first game. You can't walk the 9-hole hitter in a 3-1 game. You just can't do it. And that's what happened for Reed Garrett. It was a really bad first at bat. Luckily, he settled in after that, gets Luis Severino to hit into a double play ball on a really good splitter, and then gets a ground out from Jurickson Profar on another really good splitter. So I think Garrett's going to stay after this one. There's just so much upside that still exists there. I still think they trust Garrett more than Adam Ottavino and Ryan Stanek. And I mean, that was proof positive with the fact that they put him in the game today. But I think Garrett, if he had a really bad outing, if Garrett pitched the way Brazoban did, it could have been Garrett going down, because you could have made the case, all right, he's not in midseason form. He spent a fair amount of time on the IL, just came back. Give him 2 weeks in Syracuse to lock in his stuff and bring him back up in September. Now I think he's safe. Phil Maton pitched the clean eighth. He's in no jeopardy at all to leave the Mets roster. He's been great, and he doesn't have any options. But then it comes to an 8-1 game, and the Mets had their options. Who's gonna pitch that last inning? It could have been Ryan Stanek. It could have been Adam Ottavino. I think in the future, in those situations, it would have been one of those two guys who has not been pitching great lately, and you probably don't want to use in high leverage. But Brazoban was the answer, and I think that was in large part because he has an option, and he was probably on that bubble of guys that could go down. And you probably want to pitch that guy that's about to go to Syracuse, right? Because then you're going to insert someone into the fold for the series in Dedniel Nunez, and you want to keep your bullpen fresh. So Brazoban goes out there, and Jackson Merrill nearly takes him deep. Harrison Bader catches one on the warning track. He then walks two guys. In an 8-1 game, you got a 7-run lead, throw strikes. Gives up a base hit that scores run. There's a mound visit in there where, They're talking to him, Jeremy Hefner, trying to get him to throw strikes. Still, it's like pulling teeth, gets a pop out, but then gives up a single to Jurickson Profar that scores another run. And the body language was horrible for Brazoban. He was obviously struggling out there, and he's looking at the dugout, wondering if they're going to come out and save him. And Carlos Mendoza, you can sort of see him yelling like, it's on you. Your mess. You go clean it up. You figure this thing out. Lindor imploring him to throw strikes. Everyone's trying to get this guy to just throw the ball over the plate because you have such a big lead. The chances are they're going to hit it somewhere where there's a Mets fielder. Pete Alonso ends up making a diving stop on a ground ball, and they get out of the inning. Brazoban covering first. Funny moment at the end of the game with all the Mets sort of crowding Brazoban, cheering him on and jumping on him almost like he had done something great, kind of just encouraging him for having thrown strikes to get out of that one. And I will say credit to him for saving the rest of the bullpen and getting those outs without having to see Ryan Stanek come in, or even worse, Edwin Diaz. But he threw 36 pitches. So he's the most taxed arm in this bullpen all of a sudden. He has an option. He's pitched to a 6.30 ERA in his 10 innings with the Mets. He is as good as gone right now. Not to say we won't see him back later this season. Not to say it was a bad trade, because you still have a ton of control on the guy, basically because of how late he debuted, and there's been a lot of questions about how old he is. But I think he's listed at 34 years old. He's had a ton of visa issues as well coming over, so that's always been an issue, I think, the last couple of years with the Marlins, where it's just wondering if he's going to ever be able to show up to camp. But assuming he can next year and that's worked out, he's an arm that the Mets will be able to use out of the bullpen the next couple of years. He has a live arm. I don't think it was a bad trade, but do I think that that's going to impact his team down the stretch? Maybe not. Maybe not, because Nunez is probably going to take his spot tomorrow. And I think this is the best bullpen the Mets have had all year when that takes place, because you're going to have Dedniel Nunez, Jose Budo, and Phil Maton as guys that can pitch and leverage, setting up Edwin Diaz. You still have Reed Garrett as another one, guy that's maybe not as sharp as you want him to be, but he's definitely in that mix. You have Ryan Stanek and Adam Ottavino, who certainly have plenty of high leverage experience. This is an experienced bullpen all of a sudden, but it also has the upside of Nunez and Budo. I think this is a pretty good group. I'm not saying the Mets suddenly have a bullpen that's going to rival what they have in San Diego, but can this bullpen hold up for this series and help the Mets get the job done? I think they can. And Nunez coming into the fold is just the biggest reason why I believe that, because he's been the Mets' best reliever this year. So you now add him back into the fold. I think the Mets are in really good shape. Not to mention, I said all those names and I didn't mention Danny Young, who has some clunkers on his resume this year, but he's also had some outings like today where he's dominant. So I think Danny Young has probably been the Mets' best lefty this year. It's either him or Alex Young, but Danny's been used far more, and the strikeout stuff has really been there. So I think he's safe for the rest of this month and potentially the rest of this season. This was a big hurdle for him in particular, I think, just because of his lack of experience, where you could have seen the Mets making him the guy just odd man out, sent down. Now it's going to be Brazoban. I'd be pretty sure of that. And we'll see how the Mets build off of this solid outing altogether from their bullpen outside of the guy that's getting sent down, and what they can do for the rest of the series. It's going to be Paul Blackburn versus Joe Musgrove going on Friday night. The Mets win that game, they're going to be in a really good spot, of course, as they'll be in line to potentially win this series on Saturday. So we'll see if they can build off of this one, keep the momentum rolling. They did win the season series against the Padres tonight by winning this game, which is great. One of the things that I thought to myself when they said that, though, is that's great and that's fine and well. But if that's all they get in this series, they're going to be in jeopardy of not making the playoffs or even making that tiebreaker part of the conversation. So now the onus is on the Mets. You got a chance here playing a team that's right ahead of you in the standings. They went into this series 5.5 games back from the Padres. They won a bunch of games. You never know what's going to happen here. The Braves also won today, so the Mets are still 1.5 games back. The Braves beat the Phillies in their 3-game set. Now they got the Nationals on the schedule. We'll see if Washington puts up a fight over the weekend. But this wild card race, the Mets are winning. They're staying in the same spot. They just got to focus on themselves, win series after series after series. And they took a big step towards doing that on Thursday night. To close the show, today is Friday. I'm going to give you a little bit of a Friday farm report. Brandon Sproat made another start in AAA, and Tyler Stewart, who the Mets traded for Jesse Winker, made a start in AAA as well. I want to talk about those two guys in particular and how the Mets pitching depth is shaping up for 2025. So we'll get to that, all of that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Tonal. When life gets busy, fitting in a workout can be stressful. With Tonal, you can get efficient workouts personalized just for you that are available with the amount of time you have. Tonal is the world's smartest and most effective strength training system that helps you get stronger. Powered by AI, Tonal learns with every rep so it can deliver workouts personalized just for you. It's like having a personal trainer at home with you, as Tonal will optimize every workout just for you. Unlike traditional gym equipment, Tonal uses adaptive digital way to advance your training techniques. From professional athletes to the Mama 3, Tonal is trusted by thousands who have become their strongest. Right now, Tonal is offering our listeners $200 off your Tonal purchase with the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Tonal.com and promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off your purchase. That's Tonal.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so I want to do a little bit of a Friday farm report here. We're going to start off with Brandon Sproat, who made his third start, AAA Syracuse, and it was a rough one. 5 innings pitched, 9 hits allowed, 6 earned runs, and he gave up 3 home runs. On the year, he had given up 6 home runs prior to his promotion to AAA. In 3 starts, he's allowed 5 home runs. He's pitching to an ERA over 9 in 3 starts. All of my talk about Brandon Sproat making his MLB debut this year, starting to feel like that's not going to happen. Now, I will say that it's very tough to pitch in that league, so I would take his performance with a grain of salt, but he would have had to go up there in 3 starts and pitch to a 2.5 ERA, look lights out for the Mets to think, man, he's going to be able to face big league hitters and carve. Let's debate on where we can use him, if we could use him. Now it's looking more like, all right, he's where he's supposed to be. He's getting challenged. Let's see him face that adversity. Let's see him battle back and try to finish this season strong in Syracuse. Then you don't have to protect him on the 40-man roster because he just got drafted, so you don't have to worry about the Rule 5 draft. That'll help you this offseason to not have him on the 40. And then in the offseason, you can see where he's at. Going into spring training, there's a chance that he could pitch himself onto the roster. More likely, maybe some more seasoning in AAA. For a guy that really made AA look easy, AAA has been a lot tougher on him. In this outing that he had on Wednesday, did not have a single strikeout in 5 innings pitched. It was a brutal line for Brandon Sproat. Again, 5 innings pitched, 9 hits allowed, 6 earned runs, 3 home runs, no strikeouts. Now, this has been a theme for Mets prospects in AAA. Dom Hamill this year, 22 starts, a 6.51 ERA. Mike Vasil, 21 starts, 23 games pitched, a 5.74 ERA, although for him, it was a disaster. He's gotten better and better as the season has worn on. If you look at his last, I don't know, I'd say 12 starts, it's probably been a lot better. But nevertheless, he's coming off a start where he gave up 7 runs. So not an easy stretch at all for Vasil. Even when he's figured it out, it's still been a struggle at times. Joey Lucchesi, who just represents depth at this point, 20 games pitched, 17 starts, 4.93 ERA. Blade Tidwell, he was the first one to cruise through AA this year. 14 games pitched, 13 starts, 5.46 ERA. So it's not been easy. Even Justin Jarvis, who was probably outside of the top 30 for the Mets now, probably entered the season in the top 30 prospects they had. The guy they got in the Mark Canha trade, if I'm not mistaken, he's pitched 12 games in AAA, 4 of them being starts, 6.53 ERA, and then you got Sproat, as already mentioned, with the ERA over 9. What is very interesting about all these guys and their struggles in AAA is I think a lot of fans have sort of, I wouldn't say given up on Christian Scott, but the way that fans felt about Christian Scott when he debuted as the top pitching prospect in the system and how excited people were, and then he goes through his struggles and then has a little bit of an injury, it's amazing how quickly fans can turn on a pitcher. We've seen it this year with David Peterson, right? He was really well liked after 2022, had a nice season. Last year, he was a disaster. Everyone was out on David Peterson when he rejoined the Mets. No one expected what he's done. Now He's pitched himself back into the favor of Mets fans. It's going to come with results, but the reason why I mentioned Christian Scott is all of these top pitching prospects in the system have gotten to that level of AAA and struggled. Even Brandon Sproat now. I ranked Brandon Sproat as the top prospect in this system. And Christian Scott, not necessarily considered a prospect anymore. He's basically graduated on the injured list now. But if you would have asked me before Sproat made it to AAA, I probably would have said Sproat is the better prospect moving forward. Well, guess what? Christian Scott, 2.76 ERA and 9 starts in AAA this year. He's the only one that has handled AAA with ease. So now that I've seen some struggle out of Sproat, and these things are fluid, I don't know if I'm really going to put Sproat so much head and shoulders over Christian Scott. I think they're right by each other. I think Christian is maybe the higher floor where Sproat has potentially the higher ceiling. Both of these guys are going to be a big part of the Mets' future, and they need both of them to hit to be the type of team they want to be over the next couple of years. But it's just interesting to see that Christian Scott's like the only guy that's fared well there, and to further sort of be evidence of the fact that it can be done. Jose Butto has also pitched well when in Syracuse this year, pitching as a starter, 8 starts, 3.05 ERA. Whip of 1.22. Christian Scott, 0.97 whip. By far the best of any starting pitcher the Mets have. Those two guys, Scott and Butto, have been able to pitch in AAA. And you got to give Tyler McGill a little bit of a shout. 7 starts, 3.57 ERA, 1.30 whip. So he has been solid enough there as well, as he should be as a big leaguer pitching in AAA. But you go into next season, you think about the Mets' depth. It's Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Paul Blackburn, all big league starters that will return. Christian Scott, Jose Butto, probably the next in line to be starting pitchers. If you had a 5-man rotation with Tyler McGill right there. Then you have Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Jose Quintana, all free agents. I expect Joey Lucchesi to get non-tendered as a 40-man roster crunch. And then you have Brandon Sproat, Mike Vassell, Dom Hamill, and Blade Tidwell, who are all in AAA right now representing further depth. There's another guy that could have been part of that mix, though, and that's Tyler Stewart, who was traded for Jesse Winker and has been promoted up to AAA now. On the season in 22 starts, Tyler Stewart has a 3.45 ERA with 128 strikeouts and 112 and a third innings pitched, a 1.15 whip. Funny enough, I was texting Arm Layton yesterday on Wednesday, and he had sent, or maybe it was Tuesday where he sent me the text where he said Tyler Stewart, like he was looking into some data. If you're not sure of who Arm Layton is, I should have explained. Prospect expert for us at Just Baseball. He watches more minor league video than anyone and looks at all the data. So he'll often text me a little bit about some of the Mets prospects. And in this case, a former Mets prospect. He said, you know what? I kind of think Tyler Stewart is a guy. And the Mets obviously trade him for a rental. So, we'll monitor that situation closely. It could turn into a bad trade if Tyler Stewart ends up being a fixture in the Nationals rotation for years. But what I'll say is after Jesse Winker's hit, I texted Arm back yesterday, and I said, I'll trade Tyler Stewart's entire career for that moment. Obviously a little bit tongue-in-cheek and reactionary, but it is true. The funny thing, though, after that walk-off later that night, Tyler Stewart pitching in AAA for the first time for the Nationals, he carried a perfect game through 6 innings. Then he gave up a hit and a run. I think he hit a batter, gave up a hit to score a run. They got pulled, but was perfect through 6 in AAA, pitching in the same league that so many Mets top prospects have struggled. So we're going to be monitoring Tyler Stewart to see how that trade works out. I will say maybe the reason the Mets felt comfortable trading Stewart is they might have liked the other depth pieces they had in AA. Nolan McLean probably is an arm that the Nationals would have taken over Tyler Stewart. I think the Mets like McLean's upside more. Hasn't had nearly the experience. He's definitely raw, but he's figuring it out. He's transitioned away from being a two-way player. He is just a starting pitcher now. His last 2 starts have been good in AA. 5 1/3 scoreless, allowed 5 1/3 scoreless, gave up 2 hits, 2 walks in that second to last start. And then the most recent one, 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 4 hits, 5 strikeouts, no walks. So this is a guy that has to refine his control. Good to see him doing that in AA. He's definitely another arm to watch heading into next year. And then the last guy to mention here is Joander Suarez. I've talked about him on this show over the last couple of years, a guy that threw a no-hitter in AA last year in a 7-inning game. His last 5 starts, he has a 1.61 ERA, and he's 4-0. So Joander Suarez, a very interesting name in the Mets farm system because he is going to be Rule 5 eligible. I think he was this past season as well. Has he done enough in AA that some team would take a flyer on him and put him as their 5th starter or as a long man in their bullpen for a season and try to poach him from the Mets? I think that's a distinct possibility. So it'll be interesting to see if the Mets value him enough to protect him or they just let it ride again. They're going to have a very similar discussion on Mike Vasil and Dom Hamill as well. Guys that are in AAA, have not pitched well. Would they get poached in a Rule 5? It's going to be some tough conversations because I think for next season, you probably view Brandon Sproat and Blade Tidwell potentially as guys who maybe have a higher upside to impact your rotation. But Vasil, Hamill, and Suarez are all pushing up on that Rule 5 where a team can take them if they go unprotected. So we'll see what the Mets 40-man roster looks like. That's why I said Joey Lucchesi going to get non-tendered. It's to open up other spots for one of those guys to grab. I don't think you would non-tender a Tyler McGill. That's too good of depth to have, even if you don't love McGill, as a guy that you can put in Syracuse and call up at any time when you need a spot starter to carry through some stretches. He's still got a lot of value to the Mets. So their pitching has gotten a lot better, but trading Tyler Stewart is going to be something that we're going to be very keen to because he's in division. And there's every chance that Tyler Stewart ends up being a better pitcher than some of these other Mets prospects who they kept. But that's the guy the Nationals wanted. That's the one they got. And at least for this season, the Mets are pretty happy they have Jesse Winker. We'll see if Winker and the rest of the squad can keep things rolling in San Diego. I'll be covering that game on tomorrow's show. Also, I have been spending a lot of time today on a Francisco Lindor MVP case article for Just Baseball. After recording it, well, I stay up late. It is past midnight, and I am planning on doing some writing for sure tonight, trying to get that thing ready for a morning release. I will be talking about everything that I break down in that article on tomorrow's show as well. So appreciate all of you who will tune in. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, as I mentioned, the goal, 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything. The world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports today with our local experts from each team, league-wide experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.